So welcome back to the podcast. Exciting. First, my boy Kevin, Kev, breatholution.
Breatholution.
Why is it?
Everybody calls it breatholution.
It's probably being one dyslexic. I was struggling with. I'm going to show you a diagram of the diaphragm. That's really hard for me to say.
Diagram of the diaphragm.
Okay. But first podcast to be done with a guest in person. So Kev has invited me to the beautiful place. We've just recorded it, so there's probably I don't even know how long, probably an hour's worth of, but just
at least, yeah.
Gems after gems after gems. We do go all the way to make answer. I leave a final question to the end, but it's almost after it sounds like we've finished. So do listen to the end, because some of the takeaways, I think, from Kev, I'm going to take away some stuff from this that literally, as I step out of the dome, encouraged to be pushing into more and more of myself through vulnerability. So you've got that to look forward to.
Sure, yeah, it goes without saying. Yeah, ditto really, because I think what we spoke about today is, like I said at the beginning, it's like we kind of forget things about ourselves, don't we? So the more we talk with one another, the more we meet each other, and just keep talking about stuff, keep talking about our past and that, it's self-help, self-care.
Yeah.
It's important.
Cool. Well, listen up. This is Kev, breatholution.
Breatholution. The word breatholution.
Breatholution on the Between Breath podcast. We enter this world taking our first breath, and sadly, we leave this place taking our last. And what I want to do with this podcast is to explore what happens between those breaths. I'm David Jackson, Jacko, and this is the Between Breaths podcast. So, Kev, thank you for having me in. What do you call this? What is it?
A dome or a pod.
Yeah.
I generally call it a pod, but it's made by Pacific Domes in America. But they're pretty cool. They just look like upside, a bit like the Eden Project type thing.
Yeah, no, really? It is. To me, don't spoil the image, because to me it's like you live in here and this is your home and your house as well.
Like a hobbit.
Yeah. But thanks for having us. And this is actually the
mate.
first guest I've had on the podcast doing it in person. So.
Is it really?
Yeah,
I'm honoured.
Yeah,
I'm honoured.
It's been a long time coming in terms of us meeting.
Sure.
And it's great to be here and do this and be by the fire. I'm looking forward to potentially getting in the river with you if you let me later.
Yeah.
But for the listeners and the watchers of the podcast, just first of all, who is Kev and breatholution?
Sure.
I want to get into your story, so just
Sure.
top level a little bit. I know a lot of people will have come across you in your work and your Instagram,
Sure.
but there might be some that are like, okay, this dude looks interesting.
Who's this guy? Yeah.
Who's this guy?
So thanks for coming here, mate, and doing this. By the way, I do love a podcast, and it's quite a similar sort of setup to like I said, the Chris Guy's the one that I did.
Yeah.
But I set up Breatholution in 2020.
Yeah.
And the word Breatholution was generally an idea I probably got a little bit from James Nestor's book.
Yeah.
Because it's the kind of the study of a lost art, breathing.
Yeah.
And in the West, we're just obviously so far behind. So I thought evolution, breatholution, I thought I'll go with that, and it just kind of stuck.
I know Patrick McEwen in his, did he write it in The Breathing Cure? Talked about there being a breathing revolution.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. So it kind of fits. I thought I'd go with that name. But at the time,
and you've trademarked it, is that right?
I've trademarked that. I own that now. Yeah, to a degree. But yeah, I literally started to take people in the cold because I was, I had addiction issues, and at the time I was an alcoholic. Yeah. I stopped drinking for various reasons, which I'll probably go into in a bit. Yeah. But I started to take people into the cold, started to understand how people were reacting in the cold, how they were breathing. Yeah. And then obviously as an asthmatic all my life, I started to sort of unravel after listening to so many Patrick McEwen podcasts and James Nestor and Dan Brule, listened to some of his stuff as well, and Huberman and Jack Fieldman. Wow, some of the stuff that I've listened to him talk about, and it just kind of took off from that really. And then people started to say, can you take me into the cold? Can you take me into the water? I keep losing my breath. So that's what I did. I was just taking people in for free.
Right.
Because I was still, doing my job as I was doing property maintenance and stuff like that. Just general kind of handyman work at the time. But I'm a mechanic.
Right. So
really
mechanic by trade.
Yeah, yeah. But I was also 10 years as a signalman for Network Rail on the railway.
Right.
So I was in a safety critical job with them. So and it's just become this because people have asked me to train them, and I've just been obsessed with breath and physiology and anatomy. But as I said to you before, this work that I do, it's kind of like therapy for me. Yeah. Because I'm constantly learning from everybody. Same way I learn from you, I'm going to learn from you. Yeah. And today,
likewise.
Today
I'll learn from you.
Yeah.
And this is what it's about.
Yeah, for sure. And I learn things about myself that I've forgotten from you. Yeah. And this is the beauty of talking, I suppose, as well. And this. So
2020, you started going into the cold.
Sure.
When did this get erected? So,
I originally started to take people in the cold in Coombs Reservoir, which isn't far from here, in Chapel Milton, Chapel on the Frith. Yeah. And at the very, very beginning, it was just a handful of people during the week, and then eventually the people sort of you shouldn't be coming in here, you shouldn't be taking people in the cold, and there's people sort of rocking the boat. Yeah. So I moved location then to a place at Fernie in the river. And if you look on Instagram, that's where most of the photographs and most of the images of people sort of in the cold, and the likes of some of these famous ones as well, like Colleen Rooney, who came over with her brothers and got in the cold and stuff. That was all done in Fernie. Yeah. And I just kind of ran with it from that because I thought there was obviously a market for people.
So where did that connection come?
I'm almost certain that connection came through getting in with Adam Thomas, I think. Because I just put something out on the internet, and then I think Adam Thomas messaged me, said, do you mind if we get in the cold, come and do some breath work and stuff? Yeah. And he said, yeah, sure. At the time, I was doing sort of more Wim Hof method, sort of hyperventilation with people. Yeah. I'm doing less of it now because of Patrick and and
there's an evolution of your own practice.
Massively, yeah.
We'll talk about that later, I think. Yeah.
Sure, yeah, super important that. So he came in, and then I think she may have spotted that, and I think also I've taken in, I've done a lot of sessions with people from over sort of Cheshire way and that sort of life, and I was asked to do something with the Housewives of Cheshire as well, and do something there, but I kind of turned it down. Wasn't really my bag. Because I think they probably would have made a bit of a mockery of it, what I was doing. There'd have been too much sort of screaming and stuff and messing about. Because this work's quite serious as well. There's a lot of fun attached to it, but most of the people that have turned up have had in the past or at that present time when they came over had certain problems. Relationship problems, anxiety, panic disorder, health problems. Relationship issues and that sort of thing. Addictions. So, and it kind of turned into that then, and I was getting messages off complete strangers saying, this is happening, I'm getting this, I'm getting tingles in my fingers, I can't sleep at night. I thought, wow, this is all kind of changing direction now. At the beginning it was just, can we get in the cold? It seems fun. And after lockdown, because I was doing it during lockdown, which also sort of wound a few people up, and the police were there at one point as well over at Coombs, asking who's created this big gathering of people, because I think at one point when the police were there was about 30 people getting in at Coombs, and I didn't ask 30 people to come. I asked about half a dozen, but half a dozen on Instagram all of a sudden, where are you going? So I had to sort of keep half of them in the car and then just do it in waves. But anyway, so I'm going all over the place.
No, it's good. Because I'm just like building up a bit of a, me understanding where you've come, but also I think for people listening, it's everyone's got their story, and I think we'll go into like the evolution of like your practice, but also where I've heard you talking about addiction and stuff before, which I'd love to ask some questions about.
Sure.
But in terms of just your, you mentioned there about the seriousness to what we're doing, but at the same time, this is something around like just coaching and just our personalities and being like you're smiling now because it's like you're very approachable. When I came in, you gave me a big hug, and it's
Sure.
like that ability to like zone in, hone in, and maybe hold space and be and provide that space that is serious, but at the same time making it feel. You used the word safe before when I first arrived, before we went on put the camera live. So like, but being safe, but also making people feel comfortable and relaxed. Like there needs to be that. If it's always, knowing when it's doesn't need to be serious and that we can have a bit of a laugh about something makes me feel relaxed. So that then I feel a connection with you as the coach, and then it's easier for me to go deeper. Is that something that's just comes natural to you, or is it? Do you consciously think about how I'm coaching or how I'm being when I'm with an individual compared to when I'm being with a group, just from a coaching perspective?
I think I'll probably, Jacko, through years of not really being myself because of various issues with my ego and with addiction and stuff like that. Being myself now with everybody, being completely vulnerable with everybody, is just allow myself to always be myself. Obviously, there are times when people turn up who are visibly anxious, and when they come and take a seat in here, they sit near the door. So sort of, I don't know, probably from like a kind of neuro-linguistic sort of programming perspective, working out how people are as animals to start with, getting an idea of how vulnerable they look or feel or how they sound, because eventually they start to kind of chill out the more relaxed you are, which you probably, obviously you'll see in your own coaching. But yeah, I think it's probably just being completely open. And I start off right from the beginning by telling everybody how vulnerable I am and how anxious I am daily as a human being. And automatically that generally sort of helps people recognise their own vulnerability, but know that it's okay.
Well, it's good. Like, I know that there'll be a lot of people listening to the podcast are themselves like coaches or facilitators or teachers in some sort of way. And I think particularly when you're new to coaching, whether it's within breath work, breath training, or whether it's in some other sort of modality, it can be a little bit of a draw to sort of trying to behave a way that you think you should behave when you're coaching, rather than you're saying like just trying to zone in on and come back to being as much me as possible. I think it's a great message for people that are listening if they're coaches.
Absolutely, mate. Yeah, and I think I push that quite a lot, really, because I think a lot of the time, by trying to be somebody else, you can just go completely in the wrong direction. And at the very, very beginning of this, I thought, well, I want to do breath work and I need to go in some kind of a direction, really. And I thought, well, do I go over to Greece and study pranayama and sort of do all this sort of stuff, and go down this kind of spiritual, sort of energetic, sort of chakras sort of route and that sort of thing, or do I go more scientific? Obviously, as it is, as we know, I went down the scientific route because it was quite reliable for me. Sorry, I touched my mic there.
That's all right.
It was quite reliable for me, and I find it's probably quite a lot more reliable for a lot of men that come into this as well. Because they like the science part of it, because it's something that they can really connect to as much as people connect to spirituality and energy.
I also think those two things aren't separate, and you can look at the science and you can look at something that maybe someone from the outside doesn't think that it thinks it's separate or thinks they're opposing. And actually, the more that you look at both and hone in on the detail about it, it starts to point towards the same thing. They're just in different ways or in different words, and potentially in different times. If something originates from like 2,000 years ago, the language that it's explained in isn't with the current scientific understanding, but are the principles actually there? It's one of the things I know you'll be the same, but I love about the oxygen advantage is it gives us that understanding of how our breathing affects our physiology on like a foundational level that it helps you to be able to understand any modality of breathing or breath training.
100%, mate. Yeah, definitely that. And both modalities invite connection, so they meet in the middle.
Yeah.
And that's the key with this. As you know, and as coaches, we know that trying to get people to understand connection and feel their bodies, and not always feeling them in a kind of an aggressive way, but feeling them sometimes in a very gentle way.
Yeah.
Being very connected to very subtle sensations in the body, very, very minute things, can help you to react less in certain situations in your life, which will make your life 10 times easier to cope with, generally. And I think that's probably what I've found more than anything. There's a time for, for heavy and stress, but there seems to be more and more now time for gentle and delicate. So, and I think it's definitely going down that route, and with the things like atomic focus, and oxygen advantage, it's making that so easy to explain to people. Just brilliant, really. Super.
Nice, mate. Nice. I'm going to pick up on that about feeling the body. And then I'm going to come back to your personality.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
I got some good, yeah. So you mentioned about feeling the body there. There's something that I've been on a personal journey of, like, I played rugby since I was 6 years old, but like as an adult, like professionally, like 300 games of 13 years of basically getting whacked a lot. I had a brain injury that finished my rugby career, and one thing that you do and one thing that you learn as part of it is you learn how to not listen to your body. You don't realise you're doing it at the time, but you go into any dressing room of a rugby team before they go out and look around whilst they haven't got their shirts on and they're not fully kitted up. You'll see tape everywhere and people taking painkillers because it's a physically demanding sport and job, and you get by almost. Anyway, so you learn how to like disengage from pain so you can push through, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but in context, if that's like your only option, your only default. And when I finished playing rugby, it took me a year to get over my head injury, but once I was sort of back into normal functioning, I'm able to go and train and do things and feel like I'm being normal again, I still had a relationship with my body where it'd be difficult to listen to it, but also so used to probably being some level of pain that I'd probably still go and find it through training in some sort of weird way. And I think
addictive way,
and breathing. So there's probably two things on that you picked up on it. Like some sort of weird addiction I didn't realise I maybe had in that respect. But then also, and let's come to that second. The other point being that through breathing and actually taking my Bolt score and understanding that tells me a bit about my internal state, not just my CO2 sensitivity. It tells me about my stress levels. It tells me whether I'm going to get a cold like I've got a little bit at the moment.
Sure.
Breathing and learning, like for me, I needed to retrain my breathing because of my brain injury, but breathing has been such a tool for me to do that connection piece that you talked about and actually be able to feel what is going on inside. And I think particularly for very manly blokes as well, let's say, it's just not part of our culture. And I look at, and particularly before I met, look at Kevs of Breatholution on Instagram, the bald head, the white beard it was originally, the tattoos, and I'm like, there's a manly looking man, but then there's this like paradox, there's this contrast with like, look at that caring nature and that. What does that resonate with you, or where do you think, like, in terms of the breathing, have you?
think the first time I did any breathing, I was lay on my decking at home. I did some Wim Hof breathing.
Right.
The first time I thought, well, I'll see what this is like. I actually read Becoming the Iceman maybe about 4 years ago. I didn't really think much of it at the time. I was just talking about the breath, and I had no idea.
Yeah.
I was just carrying on doing it. 4 years ago, I was still drinking and stuff.
Right.
But when I stopped drinking, I sat down, I lay down on the deck, and I did some hyperventilation, and I was completely blown away. But when I come up from it, I was emotional.
Right.
Teary, crying.
Yeah.
And I just didn't really understand why.
Yeah.
And I was trying to think of reasons why. Did I see something? Did I feel something? And it wasn't that. I just felt Kev.
Right.
And I was just so connected to my body. I could feel everything that was me.
Yeah.
And I just don't really think I'd ever felt it like that for such a long time. I don't think you ever really do, really, because we're just not really told to.
Yeah.
We're just so busy learning and, algebra, go and do your maths, do your English, tidy up, do your room, do this, don't do this, don't cry, don't.
I was talking with Jamie Clements on podcast yesterday about like the schooling system missing out on teaching us some basic, like, okay, yes, like those of us that are involved in breathing would like us to see some basic understanding of breathing, but basic understanding of like our bodies, ourselves, like who am I?
Sure.
We miss out on that.
Absolutely. And when was school good for you, or the way you responded when we said school? Then your face went, and there was a mouth exhale, I think. And it was like, was school not a nice time, or what was school like? School was problematic because I had ADHD. I know I did now. If I went to the doctors now at sort of 14-year-old Kev, you've got ADHD.
Yeah, but back then you just got told you were naughty.
I was just told I was naughty. I was just misbehaved. He's trouble. He doesn't want to learn.
Right.
He can't concentrate. However, I concentrated on the things that I enjoyed. The craft design and technology, things I was using my hands, or cooking, or making things. Sewing, even sewing.
Right.
I was making things. I was physically doing things that I was interested in.
So is the bunting you?
Absolutely, definitely, and all my colours as well. So, I think school wasn't great for me because I couldn't concentrate. I was misbehaving. I was trying to cope with constantly mouth breathing and not really getting good quality sleep as a teenager.
And not being given any tools. Like we tend to get, you need to concentrate.
Sure.
But as a kid, you don't often naturally respond, because a lot of questions get asked, or a lot of things from kids get responded with as why, which is a great question.
Sure.
But I don't know that if I've ever been told, you need to concentrate, actually would go, rather than why, is a bit more like how.
Yeah, how
we don't get taught how to focus or how to concentrate.
Sure, which is what Patrick talks about. We get taught. There was times probably in my teenage years, and certainly as a young adult, where if I would have understood my physiology and I would have understood how my anatomy and physiology worked, as opposed to understanding algebra and how many wives Henry VIII had, it would have been far more beneficial to me. And that's no disrespect to maths teachers or history teachers.
And I am actually a qualified science teacher, so be careful what you say about teachers.
Now science was something that I loved. I could see and make things and physically see how the world was working. So it interested me. So I did okay in science. I did okay in the things that interested me. But the things that I didn't have any interest in, I was just daydreaming. Which is, part and parcel of the issue with ADHD. And, with these statistics that are coming out now at the moment, this 80% of kids in this recent study in America that are mouth breathing and snoring. It's phenomenal. That it's too high. So something obviously needs to be done. But you approach schools and they're just so crammed into the system. And even the medical system is just so tunnel vision still. That I'm explaining the Boar Effect to general practitioners. So what's that all about? Not mentioning any names. But I shouldn't be explaining something that is the most critical thing for life, which is breathing. I shouldn't be explaining this to medical professionals. Really. It's
something that's been for whatever reason, it's been overlooked. I was talking to a neurologist for the podcast last week,
right.
and he was from America, and potentially a little bit skeptical as well. So, but he was like, "Look, in America, there's a pill for everything, and you make money from having. For breathing, there's no money to be made from a pharma company." That was his opinion.
Sure, yeah.
So yeah, it sort of falls into. It potentially is influenced by other things as to why it's gone under the radar, as well as just, your body just does it naturally, does it automatically. So,
sure.
Why would we need to train it? But understanding it, why don't we understand it more? Is a great question.
Yeah, the first thing you do when you come out is you take one, and after that, the second thing you do is you eat. So if we focus as humans on just those two things and perfected them, the world would be different.
Yeah.
And what are the problems in the NHS system now? I bet if you went in there, you could probably take half of those people out because of what they consume in air, alcohol or food.
Yeah.
Half the NHS, I would imagine, is half the people that are in there are connected to chronic hyperventilation or what they consume and put in their bodies.
Yeah, or certainly by improving what they eat and improving the way that they breathe, you're going to have a very positive influence on their health and their illness. Yeah,
massive. Yeah. Absolutely. And I, as an alcoholic and somebody who spent so much time putting alcohol and cocaine in my body, that I know that I was hospitalised and then nearly hospitalised so many times with it.
Yeah.
And smoking as well, and I've done all that and damaged my body, and I know that through doing so many sessions with nurses and doctors and kidney doctors, that they're absolutely overwhelmed by people who are putting chemicals in their body.
Yeah.
And the reason they're putting the chemicals in there a lot of the time is because of trauma.
Yeah.
Childhood trauma, which is probably for another podcast.
Yeah, yeah. The talking about ADHD as a child, not being able to concentrate and potentially mentioned like addiction. So we'll talk about addictions, because I think that everyone probably has an addiction to something on some sort of level.
Sure.
And I'll share some ones that might seem more trivial, but it's still I'm still starting now to recognise it as like, okay, it's an addiction.
Sure.
But that like not being able to concentrate is something I've just been much more aware of in myself recently, and you just see it in everyday life of like the world around us and our culture, particularly where we are in the UK and in the first world, is we're the news, the TV, our phone, like just literally our life is not designed, which maybe it is designed, but maybe that's not the right word, but it's there constantly distracting us. Or if you allow it to happen, there's a distraction every single moment of every day that you don't have to go and visit yourself. Like when you did that Wim Hof breathing, so I actually felt myself, and I felt almost me for the first time or for a very long time.
Sure.
How much of the addiction for you was potentially about not going internal and not facing who we are?
I think quite a lot, and that question, it can kind of go anywhere really, because I became addicted to breathwork and cold.
Yeah.
And it's why I'm here now, because I became addicted and I got dopamine from somewhere else.
Is there a difference for you between like a positive addiction that's like been helpful in your recovery compared to a negative addiction, or is addiction all the same? In your opinion?
Yeah, in my opinion, I think addiction is problematic in terms of how you find the balance of chemicals, serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin in your body, because and I think that's probably because of how we're brought into this world. When we're born, we're given chemicals. When you latch on to your mother, you release dopamine and serotonin and oxytocin. So when you feel vulnerable and you're crying and you're cold and you're dark and you're on your own and you become emotional, to find your mother again, your caregiver, she gives you more chemicals. She gives you dopamine. So really, we're lined up because of the nurture of.
So it's a natural process, actually.
It's a natural process. The dopaminergic system is part and parcel of our evolution, because we're constantly searching for it. You're searching for it being here. You're searching for it because you want to put something on Instagram to get dopamine and likes and acceptance. The whole thing, everything that we do, we procreate for dopamine and good feel-good chemicals and safety. And because we're constantly in a flux of safety and vulnerability because of this system, I think, which Charles Darwin spoke about in 1872, this fundamental purpose of human emotions is to get the animal or the organism restored to physical equilibrium, safety. And how does it mobilize the animal? Well, it mobilizes the animal on the breath. It mobilizes the animal by asking the animal to get chemicals. So that becomes addiction, which is why things like eating disorders are connected to vulnerability, because the first time that you're and you're forced to breathe through your nose as a baby, what's the body witnessing then? Well, it's probably witnessing that the body feels safe and the animal feels safe, one, when it's breathing through its nose, which is why we feel safe when we breathe through our nose. We feel relaxed, as opposed to so they're completely sort of different things. I know that sort of went all over the place.
No.
But we're stuck in it. Yeah. So unless we balance our biochemistry, which is obviously what we do, we're telling people to increase their Bolt scores. Yeah. Because increasing the Bolt score won't just make you physically more capable of existing as an animal. Yeah. It will also make you react less or react differently to past trauma, but also present danger. And that's the key, and that's how that's working with anxiety. Yeah,
because essentially the breath is linked to our nervous system, and your nervous system, like your stress response, will affect how you respond to those things. And for those, maybe if people haven't come across like the Bolt score, it's just a phrase I've been using a little bit more recently, is just restoring our body's relationship with carbon dioxide. Just restoring that, whatever that then looks like for people. But
restoring it, I like that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that finding that equilibrium. So what is that equilibrium? It's your alarm, your body's alarm system to take a breath. But your body's alarm system to take a breath is connected to so much more than just your breathing or your nervous system. It's connected to everything. It's connected how you find your next dopamine.
Right.
Potentially.
Yeah.
Because the first time that you did it, when you come out, your lungs empty of fluid and you gasp for the first time, you're in fight or flight. You've been separated from 9 months of parasympathetic.
This is all happening when you can't remember that.
Yeah.
You can't think about it or process it back then. You can't think about it and reprocess it now.
No.
I've never thought about that. I've never thought about you've mentioned it a couple of times, like the importance or just the relevance of that first breath and being a baby and how that breathing and how the dopamine response is all. I've never considered that, how that fits into the puzzle of like how that's affecting me or us as adults.
Sure, but I think when I bring people here, I say to them, I'm going to go back, and I'm just going to go all the way back, all the way back to the first cells on Earth, because they reacted the same way. Yeah. They were frightened because the environment became hostile. Yeah. Heat and acidic conditions. So what did it do? It felt frightened, the cell, to a degree, in human terms. It felt frightened, and it adapted, and that's how we're all here. So the cells in the human body are doing the same thing. The animal's doing the same thing, and certainly on that first breath, in terms of the pre-Boxinger complex, I think the explosion that goes off in the brain, just the same as when a baby reaches up and grabs that toy, that mobile, for the first time and grips and holds. Oh, what's that?
Yeah.
And then after then they start to develop that first breath. Wow, what's going on in the brain there at that point? The pre-Botzinger complex, your breathing centres are, this is how we get oxygen, this is how it works, and it's going crazy. So, and also from that point then it's fear, cold, and you're separated from your caregiver. Even though you're still connected by the cord, you're still cold and bright and noisy. It's complete fight or flight. Maybe your first trauma.
Yeah.
In terms of the body keeping the score.
Yeah.
Does it remember it? Possibly, yeah. Why not? So from that point then you go from fight or flight to parasympathetic again. It's not the womb, it's not ideal, but it'll take it, it'll have it anyway. And then you're forced to breathe through your nose. So the pre-Botzinger complex, your brain, is it recognising then that breathing through the nose is connected to safety, and then so safe, in fact, that you fall asleep on the breast or the bottle, and the organism will only fall asleep when it feels safe.
Yeah.
So you're in that system, then you're put down, you wake up, you're cold, you're frightened, there's nobody there. What do? You do it again. Fight or flight, and then what does mum do? She does it again and again and again and again and again and again and again. So we're already in the dopaminergic system.
Yeah.
We go through school, brothers and sisters, we latch onto friends that remind us of ourselves a little bit, mirrors, teachers that remind us of our parents, because we're honing in on the safety.
These are the things that just an understanding of like what our nature is like, and then understanding what the world around us is like, to just help us make as adults, or when we're growing up. You know, when you're growing up and you're a teenager, what do? You want to fit in with, you don't want to stand out, you want to fit in, you want to feel safe, you want to be cool, you want to fit in with your mates. So you do a lot of things that aren't based on what you do. It's often about fitting in with other people.
Sure.
And yeah, I just think we go into adulthood a lot of the time, maybe not everyone, but just speaking from experience of my own my own self, but feeding off what you're describing, that we don't have time to really process and understand what's going on in life. And I feel like it was very much when experienced quite a wild, strange 3 days when I did the ultra marathon Ring of Fire thing, where it was like, okay, choosing to do this thing, whatever, but it may just hone in on like what's important in life. And it was like the support from my wife and family to help me go through that thing, just my breathing, being able to take my next step, and the food, like you said, and like it was I was a pretty wreck of a man, and needed a lot of help, but there was no email, no phone, no work, no nothing. And I look back on that time, even though physically and emotionally it was very like traumatic for my body, I look back on it with very fond memories. And it was a time when I got to see, but you got to choose to be put into a situation where you go, okay, I start to understand what's actually really important for me. And I think that I was lucky after I had my brain injury. I couldn't do anything for, quite a long time, and I had to rethink what my career was, or my next career. You're always going to have, when you play a sport like rugby, you're always going to have a next career. I was 31, I just signed a new 2-year contract, but I was getting towards the end of my career, so I was always thinking about what I was going to do afterwards. But I had this like hard stop put in place, and actually an opportunity to go, what's the next chapter going to look like? And I literally made lists of like, what do I enjoy doing? What do I want to do? Like, what's important to me? And having time to take stock and go, right, this is the direction I want to go in, rather than at 16 you get asked, or even probably 15, you choose your GCSEs, because you can drop some subjects. Then you might choose your A-levels, or you go on to, sort of, depending on what my process was, like GCSEs, A-levels, university course, like making these decisions about what I wanted to do. And I had no idea really what I wanted to do. And then all of a sudden I did engineering. I could have just been in this path I did a placement year. I was at British Gypsum making plasterboard,
Wow.
trying to make plasterboard stronger was my thing. Anyway, but like, no, definitely not cool. It was,
Well, yeah,
but
horsehair.
but yeah, no, we put lots of things in there to try and make it. Horsehair would be probably quite good, but just this like, I just think we just get swept along. But even like rugby, I did rugby because my dad took me along to it. I enjoyed getting muddy, and then ultimately I was good at it. So we do the things that we're good at.
Yeah.
Just because you're good at something. I mean, I did like it, but
Sure. And your dad liked it, obviously, as well.
Yeah.
So kind of
and that was something. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I just think in life, it's easier to get swept along, all the way to you literally take that last breath.
Sure. Not really you.
And not really chosen your path. I don't know if that's necessarily right, but I definitely found that like for me taking stock like and just stopping. Yeah,
about 100% that resonates. Yeah, and the fact that I'm doing this now with an engineering background myself and mechanics, and you know, this is respiratory mechanics. It's biomechanics.
Yeah. Well, did the alcohol and drug addiction, when it stopped, did that actually create that stop for you of like, this can't go on? Like, what am I going to do? Like, how, I don't know. Was that a period in your life where it went? Because obviously what you're doing now here is very different to
of course
what was before.
Yeah, and like I said,
was it conscious?
It wasn't conscious. No, it literally all this just kind of happened.
Okay.
Because I didn't have any thought in my mind. This is I want to teach people how to breathe. Never did that even come into my mind. I just thought, well, I'm doing it and it kind of working. It's getting great. They're giving great feedback and Kev, they like it and all this sort of thing.
I think that's also beautiful though, of like the natural evolution of it being organic. That's what when I did the Oxford Vantage training, I'd read the book, really liked it. I was working as a strength and conditioning coach.
Right.
I wanted to learn it for my own self. I didn't even really think I was going to use it with the athletes I was training.
Wow.
I just wanted it for my own breathing, and then you did my case studies to get qualified, and I just even though I wasn't very good at it then, but the results people had were really great, and the feedback you get is really great, and I was like, this is life-changing for me, and look what it's doing. It's just all of a sudden then it's like, okay, now I'm teaching it, and you're like,
that's a mirror.
It's almost the opposite of me going, right, stop and choose what you want to do. But I think there's got to be a place for both. I just think there's only having the one. Particularly if people are stuck in something that we're like, I'm stuck in something that I don't enjoy, I don't like, I don't feel fulfilled.
Sure.
Or even being like, do you stop and think about, do I feel fulfilled? How actually am I? I found like the breathing light exercise, like sitting still and trying to breathe for more than 2 minutes, or not even, but just couldn't concentrate, mind going everywhere, didn't like being still, like doing everything to actually be and sit with how am I how am I when there's nothing else going on? Am I okay with me when nothing else is going on other than my heart beating and me breathing?
Sure. And that's not easy, is it? And sometimes it's ugly too, because the self is sometimes a bit ugly.
Yeah.
You know, we don't like the self, and a lot of the time that's what happens when people go and get into these big group sessions in the cold.
Right.
And they say, oh, it's wonderful. They go home and get into a tank in their garden, and they have to get out.
It's different on your own to in a group. It's a totally different energy, for sure. For sure.
Because you see yourself in that moment, or you see yourself and you're confronted with the ugliness of yourself, your narcissistic tendencies, your ego.
Let's come back to that, because that's going to be juicy. But with addiction, like very is not the right word. I'm more aware now of things that I'm potentially addicted to, and even if they might be like positive addictions, trying to maybe go, I don't know how to do it, I'm just sort of trying to go a layer below that, to go, rather than just swapping it for another addiction,
Yeah.
what's the thing behind it? And I know you've talked a lot about that dopamine cycle inherent from us from a baby, and it's potentially natural, but is there anything on there from you around, presumably you're happy or you're glad that you've dealt with the alcohol and drug addiction, because it's so negative in what it's going to do for you as a person in your life, but then do you see addiction to breathing and the cold a bad thing? Like, and how would you, if you were working with me and someone else there, like, how would we work on exploring what's the thing underneath it?
Yeah. Well, the thing is that I'm no longer addicted to breath and cold.
Okay. How do you know? When do you know that you're not? How do you know that?
Because I don't turn to it the same anymore as I used to.
Right.
Because I'd feel, sometimes I'd feel as though I need a drink.
Yeah.
And I'd hit the cold.
Okay.
And then
so it was a direct swap. So it was obvious to you that it is a direct swap.
Yeah, I'd be feeling quite low or whatever, or I'd just be feeling, just not really feeling myself. And I'd do some breath work, do some cold, and I'd feel okay afterwards. And of course, as soon as you get back to safety afterwards, the body then thinks, oh, that works. Next time, I'll just do a bit of that again. So that it'll pop it in the brain, maybe. So, yeah, that worked. Just the same as the latching onto your mother did. Right, first off, it works. Eventually, you become safe afterwards, so it works again, which is unfortunately kind of how trauma works. Because people who are traumatized, they eventually get to safety unless they die, which more often than not they don't. But they get to safety. So whatever it was that they did through that process to get eventually safe one day, it kind of, the body will use that again. We'll do that again. Do that again. We'll breathe like that again. Go there again. Do that. Take a drink. Have another tablet, have a diazepam. That's what made you feel better, and which is the origins kind of addiction. So you're doing whatever it is to feel safe. I think it's probably why eating disorders are connected to vulnerability, because the actual process of eating is not the food, and it's not even the fact that they're hungry. And I had this out with, not had this out, but I had a conversation with somebody recently who I did a session with, and they said that when they have their eating binge, they're not feeling hungry. So you're addicted to feeling safe as opposed to addicted to the thing that you're addicted to. So you're addicted to the feeling of of being safe. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So when people are binge eating, they're because you're breathing through your nose again. So does the kind of the body recognise that you're when you're nourished, you're breathing through your nose, and you're because you can't breathe through your mouth and eat at the same time most of the time.
Yeah.
So addictions are obviously connected to your body in so many different ways. Connected to your breath for sure.
Yeah.
And I think the thing is with addictions, any addiction has the potential to make you very unhappy because of how it makes you feel when it's going well. So like you said, backing off slightly, you're kind of not leading yourself up for a fall as much if you get too, unless you just keep going and keep going and keep going and keep going. Eventually you'll crash.
Yeah.
And this is what happened with, you probably heard the story of what's he called now? The rugby player who kicked the winning goal.
Johnny Wilkinson.
Johnny Wilkinson. So he kicks the kick of his life, and the whole world is watching. It couldn't be. It was a stage with lettuce and tomato around. Perfect. But the next morning he couldn't get out of bed.
Well, I think he said
Depressed.
it was even like within minutes of having done it.
Rubbish. Yeah.
It was like
anticlimax. Now what?
Well, now, yeah.
So
I think it's common in sport. Like Kelly Holmes has said a similar thing after she won 2 gold medals at whichever it would have been London, and it's like you reach the pinnacle of your sport, and I think that's what sport is great, and I've been in that, but like particularly when it's professional, it's very easy for it to be your identity, and like anyone, their job is often say to someone like, oh, hi Kev, nice to meet you, what do you do? You know, that's the normal question you ask
Sure.
someone. What do you do for a job, rather than
Sure.
because if I say, because it's very difficult to ask, go, you know, who are you? How are you as a person? Are you content, or
Yeah,
it's a very weird. It's a that's why we have these surface level conversations like, oh, you're a mechanic, okay, weather's all right. It's like, yeah, trying to go a bit deeper, I think is
sure. And I think the thing is with addiction, I think it's just always compensation. You're always trying to compensate. Just recently, I've been doing some microdosing. I don't know if I can say that on here or not, but I don't really care, to be honest. But I've been doing some microdosing. So is it kind of compensating through chemical imbalance?
the
So
microdosing of what?
psilocybin,
What's that?
mushrooms.
Okay.
So which a lot of people are doing at the moment. It does kind of make you feel slightly different. Makes you feel a bit brighter sometimes. Not all the time, but we're constantly in a battle of chemicals all the time. Especially if you've had a past where you've constantly relied on chemicals. It's an instant hit.
Yeah.
And as an alcoholic, I'd still drink now. If you put one here and I could safely drink it, I would just drink here, sat with you. I would drink cans of Special Brew talking to you now because I quite like the feel of it.
Right.
And the trouble is,
When was the last time you had a drink?
oh God, over 2.5 years ago.
Yeah. And so you wouldn't, for you now, it would be a problem if you had one?
To be honest, I don't think it would.
But it's not worth it. It's not worth testing. As in, for you in your mind, you'll never have a drink again, type of thing, just to be safe.
I don't really feel as though I need it in my life. I don't really think. I don't feel as though I want it.
Yeah.
You know.
See, it's difficult for like I've played rugby, flipping done plenty of binge drinking, like.
Sure.
But in terms of, I've never been someone that's drunk during the week. Like I now might have a half a glass of red wine with a meal or something in a social setting, but I don't like the feeling of, it's more like feeling rubbish the next day or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things. It's difficult to be, even though I know that I'm addicted to certain things. When you've not been addicted to the same thing,
sure,
it's difficult to understand what that
is.
It's like, well, it's difficult to understand what it's like to just be another person. You
Yeah,
have no
of
idea.
course,
We make assumptions. I make an assumption of how you feel sat there on that chair or pump or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And that gets a bit weird in the head.
Individual consciousness.
Yeah,
it's completely different, isn't it? Yeah. And I think the trouble is with my addiction is I was drinking every day for a long time.
Right.
And if I did feel bad the next day, I knew that if I had another drink, it would go, it would stop.
Right.
And it did. But obviously then the drinking became earlier and earlier and earlier and earlier. And I suppose jumping on board with Network Rail, becoming a signalman, it kind of saved me really.
Right.
Because it's a safety critical role, it's zero tolerance to alcohol.
Right.
So you cannot drink before a shift. If anything goes wrong on the job and you're tested, you're liable potentially for prison if something goes wrong. So it stops you drinking. Right. But unfortunately, because you have sort of 5 days on and then 3 days off, it turns signalmen into binge drinkers.
Right.
So as soon as you come off your night shift, I was straight on it.
Right.
So which was worse really for my health. Although I didn't really know it at the time. But then I was off work with depression and anxiety, and I was on antidepressants, and I was in a bad place.
Yeah.
But the kind of thing that turned it really was, I lost my sister in 2019, Yvonne. She was only 49.
Oh, sorry.
And thank you. Yeah, and she died of sepsis in the finish. But there was a little bit of her death that was kind of connected to alcohol. She's a chronic pain sufferer.
Right.
But she was kind of drinking and we didn't know it.
Right.
And that was kind of mixed with medication and stuff. And she went in for a very simple routine operation, but it went wrong. You know, and I think she was her health was just so low that she couldn't recover from this, from sepsis in Macclesfield Hospital. And I hit the drink hard after that point. But I just thought I'm going to end up the same. I'm going to end up, my life's going to be ending early. And I even found myself in the garage, you know, in my garage at home, ready to take my own life. Which was, you know, it was horrible. I was absolutely desperate at that point, which is why sometimes medication can be good.
Yeah,
because
course.
You know, I'm not against medication. I love this work that I do, but at the time, you know, the antidepressants took the edge off it for me.
Yeah, yeah.
And
So then you could go and do some stops the immediate danger, and then you can be in a place to do some other work.
Sure. So I saw this thing for 1 year no beer. I saw that and I thought, well, I'll give that a go. And I thought, I'll give it 6 months instead. I'm going to do 6 months off. I've made a decision. I'm going to have 6 months off alcohol. But I was already lining up my drinks for Christmas. So if I'm going to get a bottle of that, I'm going to get one of those on Christmas Day. And then, hang on a minute, I'm lining up my next alcohol. After 6 months of being off.
Did you know you were addicted at that point? Like,
oh God,
when did you? How? Yeah, when did you know you were addicted?
I think it was just obvious because everything that I did evolved around drink.
Right.
So if we were going to Wales, we were talking about Snowdonia and stuff before, and that. Go to Wales, we'd have to go near a microbrewery, or we'd have to go somewhere where there was a pub, where I can, you know, by 11 o'clock in the morning, I was ready for a drink every day.
Wow. Okay.
So, and I'd be drinking in the caravan and what have you, you know, and sometimes I'd be drinking in the car, you know, which is a shameful thing to say. And it was reckless, but I was an addict, addicted to having the alcohol in my body, because I'd feel terrible without it. It was horrible, Jacko. It was horrible. When people tell me they're addicted to alcohol, and people say, oh, I need to come and do some breath work, I'm addicted to alcohol, so you've got to have some time off it. Yeah. And that year off it, you know, even before the year, 8 months or whatever, you know, it saved my life. Yeah. Because it just allowed me just to give, you know, to be without it long enough to feel. Yeah. And then
come back to that.
Yeah.
Come back to that. You already said. Be able to feel yourself rather than numbing it.
Which is exactly what it was doing. And now, because I've done so much work on myself, I know why I was drinking. I know why I was had such an addictive personality, so to speak. I don't like using that as an excuse, but I was constantly unhappy with self, and I couldn't sit with self, like you mentioned before. Just sitting there and just breathing slowly and listening and to being happy with self. Maybe even getting a bit of comfort and dopamine release from just being content with the self. Well, you're happy in the now. Yeah. I'd never felt that before. I needed somebody there or something to I needed to be around people all the time, and you know, I wasn't really happy unless I had some sort of chemical in me, or you know, I just wanted to be away from this. Yeah.
Well, we said you mentioned sort of ego in it and looking at self and it being not wanting to do it because it looked ugly. It might look ugly at times. I said we'd come back to that. So let's look at that. So, looking at the self and maybe the self being ugly, what I smiled and you smiled when, and we've talked a little bit about this before, but I've probably got some of my own experience of this that I'm aware of, but haven't necessarily, maybe I've not particularly processed, don't really understand it that much, but I know that I didn't like sitting still and doing nothing. And actually looking at yourself. Sure. I don't think I even knew how to go inwardly, and I think that the breath being literally inside of you is a nice doorway to open into that. But what, from your perspective, I'm eager to definitely learn in this. From your perspective, what is that process like? What do we, when we feel the resistance because maybe the self is ugly to go and look at, what's been your process, or if you were going to guide me or someone listening, what are the things I need to be either doing or what's that process to try and tackle that? We need to tackle it? I don't know, but anything on that?
I think probably we need to tackle it now. I mean, obviously the world is run by male ego. Obviously, we only need to look at world leaders and politicians to know that it's all completely messed up through male domination and male ego. I think it probably get into a lot of trouble for this, but it'd probably be better if women were ruling because they think differently towards we do, and
or maybe at least a balance.
Yeah, a bit more balanced. As opposed to it all being sort of male sort of dominated, and dominated by males who've had very difficult childhoods as well. Who are egoic, and they have unusual They have unusual concepts about women, a lot of them as well,
Right.
which, you know, and certainly I did as well. I think I'm more feminine than male, really, because I was brought up with 4 sisters. I had no brothers.
Right.
So
So you're one of 5?
I'm one of
You're
5.
one of 5. I'm one of 4.
Right.
Yeah.
So big family.
Yeah, I like it.
But no brothers or all sisters. So I knew far more at 12 years old about makeup and false tan.
No, and now it makes sense as to why you look so beautiful.
But you know, so I struggled to be a male.
Right.
So all these kind of tattoos and all this sort of thing
Right,
originally
okay.
started off as me trying to fit in as an alpha.
Right.
And the bald head and sort of, you know, and I used to have this box beard. And I used to go around thinking I was like some sort of 10 men, you know. I was and going in the gyms and strutting about and stuff and all that sort of thing. It's just, you know, wasn't really me, because I
Okay.
was a little bit afraid, really.
Or you thought that you were female, so you were trying to counter that with being more alpha?
I suppose I was trying to, because I didn't really have sort of much male interaction.
Right.
My dad was always really busy,
Yeah.
and he's not predominantly a sort of a man's man, a male, so to speak, a masculine
Right.
male, and I think that was kind of what I needed as a young boy, and I wanted to be making things and doing lad stuff and little guns and, you know, playing in the thing, and I didn't really have much of it. I had to kind of self-soothe myself with that,
Right.
and it kind of led into me getting involved with the wrong males
Okay.
and getting the wrong messages about how I should be. And my uncles were, some of them were dodgy, and mixing with them at an age that I was very impressionable,
Yeah.
it caused problems for me, and I thought that was how you had to be. So, and quite closed, as opposed to like now,
Right.
you know. And so I think in terms of, I think ego is a bit like cholesterol.
So if someone,
There's good and bad.
some people that know you from back then,
Sure.
compared to those, and there must be people in your life that do know you from back then and also know you now. Like what difference and what transition do they see? Do they see a totally different person?
I think there was times when people saw Kev, but more often than not they saw the guard.
Right.
You know, there was always this sort of,
I can imagine you could do quite a scary, scary, don't mess with me sort of.
yeah, but wasn't really, and it's not me.
Yeah.
You know, this is Kev.
Yeah.
Always, but I was just so afraid of it, all my life.
Right.
And the thing that's really allowed me to sort of witness how ugly my narcissism and my ego was and is still. Every day, you know, it's like you know, Carl Jung refers to it as your shadow. It's there all the time.
Yeah.
You know,
What you said you were like scared of? So the guard was because you were scared of like being actually yourself. What do you think you were scared of?
I don't know. I think that's probably that acceptance thing, you know. But there was definitely issues with abandonment as a child, and I don't mean abandonment for my mum and dad. They were amazing, and I had a great childhood. But I think I needed to be around sort of males a lot more and get more information from males when I was younger, and I just didn't have it. So I was always a little bit afraid. You know, I was smacked when I was in school, and that frightened. You know, I had a bit of a problem then with males, a bit bullied in primary school, which then made me sort of bully others in secondary school. I became the bully in secondary school, which was horrible.
Well, because if you don't want to be bullied, because that's what you've experienced before, the probably safest thing to not get bullied is to be the bully.
Is to be the bully, yeah, which was completely not Kevin at all. So you see, this is kind of what happens with it, really. The animal feels wounded, so sometimes it bites.
But all of that, everything that's happened to you is what makes you who you are today, right?
Yeah,
like
sure.
if you hadn't have, you know, you said something like, you know, when you said like even shamefully drinking whilst I was driving, or we're not saying any of these things are that was, you know, your word, but not saying any of these things are good, but it gives you a level of like empathy for people, or just experience to be able to just connect on a different level when you can say, look, I know I've been there, or I've been flipping worse. There is a way out. It's hard to say that to someone if you haven't actually been there.
Yeah, of course it is. Yeah, you've got to have kind of lived and experienced some trauma, and I've had the pleasure of having an incredible wife who stuck with me for near enough 30 years. Poor Sarah, she's gone through all that rigmarole and trauma and stuff that I created when I was an addict. And
so what does she see now?
Well, she sees probably what she originally saw, which was the vulnerable Kev. But not many people saw that vulnerability because I wouldn't let them have it.
But you showed her.
Obviously, yeah, because obviously as we're attracted to one another's vulnerability. And that's what allows us to procreate and make more little Jackos and more little Kevs or whatever, going forward. Whatever it is you do and whatever choice you make as couples or whatever. But to do that, we have to be vulnerable. And when we're vulnerable, we're parasympathetic. Generally, with one another, we're naked, if you like. If you sort of use a sort of a biblical term, and when we're naked, we're vulnerable, but we procreate in that moment. So you've got to be vulnerable for evolution to take place, and I kind of stick to that now. And everywhere I go, I'm just vulnerable. There's times where my ego sort of comes in and says, "No, you have to be the alpha here. You have to," and I see it. I know what it's doing. I'm just like, not today. I know what it's doing, and I still do it. I do it on Instagram, and I've blocked people in the past, and I've done things and avoided people because of my ego. Right. But it's just all a learning. Yeah. It's all a learning purpose.
I had
a learning tool.
I had some questions about social media that I wanted to ask us. You mentioned Instagram. Like for, I guess almost at first, like why do you use social media? It sounds like you've had, and everyone does have various different relationships with it.
I had attachment issues to what I was doing. Oh, this is mine. Breathing, cold water, it's all mine. But obviously I was guiding people, and then they were going off and doing their own thing and making it successful. So it kind of attacks your ego a little bit.
Right, you're like, hold on a minute.
That was mine, that was me. Okay. So I realised that pretty quickly that was attachment issues of mine, of my own, and ego problems. So, you just have to kind of undo it. But I use Instagram, and I wasn't supposed to I never used Instagram. 2 years ago, I had about 300 followers. Yeah. I just put some pictures out there, and as soon as I started taking pictures and putting people on, smiling and getting in the cold and stuff, it must have looked quite dynamic, and then the followers started to come up. Well, as you know, with yours, 25.
Well, no, seeing. I mean, I feel like I must have been following you since it must have been relatively early. You popped up on my feed. Right. In that, I think you had a sizable following, but in terms of time frame, saying if it's like 2020 was when it sort of all kicked off for you, I wouldn't be surprised if it was like, maybe it's 2021, but there's something with like we've already sort of said with your personality. You said like before the guard, like I could imagine you being you have with the tattoos and the bald head, and it was the white beard at the time when I first seen you, and it was like there's a look, but then there was like this, like I say, this like like a gentle giant, or there's the contrast. I think was interesting to sort of see.
Yeah, and it always surprises me.
Are you aware of that? That like you could look very intimidating. Like if you like scrunched your face up and walked down, my mum would be petrified because she if you looked angry and it was dark, my mum would be scared.
Sure, yeah. And I think there was a time in my life where I wanted to look like that.
Right. Okay.
But of course now it's kind of undoable.
Yeah.
Because I just look the way I look. But
I think I'm like saying that it's cool that you're breaking any sort of misconceptions that someone
for
might
sure,
have.
yeah.
It's like,
people still cross the road when they see me taped up with my sandals on.
well, yeah, well,
Sure.
it's with the mouth tape or the sports mask or the Darth Vader mask.
Exactly. They think I've escaped from somewhere. I think when they see me.
Yeah, I've had those looks.
Sure, but yeah, it always surprises me. Women come on their own here.
Yeah.
And I do sort of look quite intimidating, but obviously, once people realise how vulnerable I am, and sometimes more vulnerable than some of the people that I'm working with. I'm delicate, Jacko.
Yeah.
I am a really delicate soul. I still don't really like being behind a camera.
Yeah.
I still find it a bit uncomfortable.
Which I think is people will be interested. People, because some of the people that follow you on Instagram will be listening or watching this and be like, oh really, like.
Well,
as in they might just, they see the pictures or the videos and like unless they've listened to you say those types of things before, they might not know that. But I think that's what's beautiful about being, using the words vulnerable, but it's also just being authentic and honest and just going, like that is how it is.
Sure.
This is me, and that's you being as you are. Like I had a conversation with someone I'm mentoring at the moment who, she was like, I need to get better at my videos. Like, I don't like being on the camera. I feel a bit awkward in it. And it was like, you're really good at it. She said, I was like, okay, thank you. That's nice for you to say that. But you haven't asked me how long had I been making videos for.
Sure.
And it was like, well, I was trying to make some YouTube videos. I mean, before Instagram even started, I remember my mate introducing me to Twitter. He was like, you need to get on Twitter. It's like, there's no rugby players on. It was literally like 2013 or something. It must have been over 10 years ago. And even before then, I was awful. I felt like everyone feels weird talking to a camera. Everyone does.
Yeah.
But if you do it for 10 years, then it feels a little bit more normal after a while. But so does anything if you do it long enough. Like, do it, be rubbish at it, try again. Do it, be rubbish at it, try again. Like
making the uncomfortable comfortable. That's
I just think I just don't believe that it's. There'll be some things that are like people are more naturally gifted at certain things than others.
Sure.
Yeah, for sure. But I don't believe there's nothing that you don't get better at if you just keep doing it.
Just keep doing it.
Like tying your shoelaces when you're a kid, you can't tie your shoelaces. You don't think twice about it as an adult. It's this silly analogy, but like.
Sure.
It's just because you just do it.
Yeah.
You just get better at it. There's nothing complicated about tying your shoelaces.
For sure.
There's also nothing complicated about talking to a camera.
No.
You just have to
Same
be. But if you're trying to be someone that you're not, or projecting in a way that which comes back to what you said originally, being yourself is dead easy to be. Being someone else is hard to be.
Sure. Yeah. Because the guard comes up then.
Yeah.
And and sometimes I still find myself, doing that. The guard still comes up sometimes.
Yeah.
So I suppose it's kind of witnessing what you're doing in certain situations.
Yeah.
And I think, I'm almost certain that my higher bolt score is helping me to be less anxious in social situations.
Yeah.
So that's massive, isn't it? That means everything.
Yeah.
So people say, going back to the breath, and I want to improve my bolt score because I want to be able to run up a mountain with my mouth taped shut. That's fine, but think about what it's doing for mental health. If it's changing the interoceptive environment of the animal, and how that perceives external and internal messages.
I'm the same. I can manage my brain and my thoughts and my ups and downs far better now than when my bolt score was less than 10 after my brain injury.
Sure, mine was 9 seconds.
Yeah, I was like 8, 9. Like it's not exactly. I was scored as a severe asthmatic, and I had no asthma. Even at that time, I didn't even know there was anything wrong with my breathing.
But the animal obviously was vulnerable.
Well, it was injured, and it hadn't recovered. But that's you're giving an example there of asthma, but some people might be even lower. I've got clients who bolt score starts even lower than that, not because of an injury or something, but just because of various different stresses on the body. A physical injury is just one type of stress, but the emotional stress, and something that you'd said earlier about understanding scientifically what's going on in our physiology and things, it can be, I think it'd be really helpful for people to cognitively understand that, you know, my body's relationship with carbon dioxide, when I'm sensitive to it, Bolt score being low, like, I'm more prone to having anxious thoughts. There's science to suggest that, or to explain that, and studies to show that. And I think it's very helpful for, certainly I find it, but I think others, when we actually cognitively understand what it is, it starts to, one, I think, help awareness, but two, just like a bit of a shift of, when you know what's going on, you can feel a little bit more in control. I think that the hardest thing is when you feel out of control. Like, I had the experience of, after my brain injury, am I going to get better? How long is it going to take me to get better? Is there anything I can do? And the advice was, there's nothing you can do apart from just do nothing. Don't stimulate the brain, which is not true from what we know now. I should have been doing stuff. I should have been working on my breathing, but didn't. And then, well, we hope you're going to make a full recovery, but we don't know, and we don't know how long it'll take. So just that, like,
not in control
wilderness of just like not knowing and having no control because nothing to do. I think is one of the most challenging things we go through in life, when we don't have anything to cling on to.
100%. And I think, you know, what are the words out of control, and what are we in control of as human? We're not really in control of anything, really. And when people say to me, sometimes I just feel as though I'm not in control. Well, you know, that's okay. It's okay not to be in control all the time. You know, but what is not being in control is that the body's alarm to breathe. Does that make sense?
Right,
So when you feel as though you're not getting in control, when you're not in control, that kind of attaches itself to, am I getting enough air? You know, it attaches to things like claustrophobia and OCD. OCD is you being in control of something. You know, bulimia is a bit like being in control of what you put in and what you let out. So there's control issues there, or control freaks, or, you know, people call it control, but there is issues with your control. But is control connected to the breath? Is it how many times you're breathing? And is that driven by this false alarm to keep over breathing? You know, and it's the complete negative sort of loop all the time that people are in. It's phenomenal, really, when you think about what the oxygen advantage is and how it changes the biochemistry and how it changes, you know, the biomechanics of the animal. It's just, you know, the organism. It's just phenomenal, really.
It's and one of the things I just love about it the most is that the breath being so powerful and phenomenal, as you say, but so easy to just take that invitation to just listen to it, be aware of it, like you can do something with it.
Massive, absolutely.
Kev, I've loved this conversation, and one question I was going to ask about, I guess it's linked to the social media thing a little bit, but why, from your perspective, I'm sure you've had this with other people that you've never met. We'd never met before, but we'd spoken before, we'd messaged on Instagram before. Like, from your perspective, because I don't really know if I know how to even answer this question for myself, but when we met outside and we had a big hug, like, why do we feel? Because it's a positive side of, so without social media, we wouldn't know each other existed.
Sure.
So it is a positive side to social media, but why do you think we feel like we know each other before having actually physically met and had a deep conversation like this?
I don't know. It's an unusual sort of connection, isn't it? And, you know, I've had this kind of connection with other people that have turned up as well, because I think we're just generally thinking in the same direction, aren't we? We're generally trying to get a message out there to people. That's exactly the same. We've felt the same. We've had similar things sort of happen to us in the past, and I think you just kind of know that you get a feeling when you communicate with somebody, what kind of level you're at. You have noise in the background, don't you? Your head makes noise. This person's like this, or they're like that, or they want this, or they're after that, or they're going here, or what are they planning to do next? And this is the nature of the nervous system, to keep you safe, is to tell you these messages. 99% of the time they're wrong. And which is why if you just try and open up and be absolutely positive with everybody in the same way with every person, you can't really go wrong, really. If you're exactly the same with every person on earth, you can't really go wrong with that. It worked all right for Mother Teresa, and you know, just be the same with everybody. Don't have your guard up with anybody, even if your nervous system is trying to put one up. Regardless of, you know, whatever those messages that it uses to do such. You know, just be you.
Be you with everybody. I like that.
Absolutely. And you know, and love people, and accept them for who they are, you know.
And does that start with accepting yourself?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And I've definitely come to terms with that. I used to carry a lot of shame and guilt for the things that I'd done, and you know, and the person that I was, and my addictions, and you know, I've had all sorts of addictions. One of these people that in the past constantly buying things all the time just to have things, and then chuck them away on the shelf. You know, just do a sport and buy all the gear, and then just get bored with it. And you know, it's another obsessive, compulsive control thing. You know, and I have no guilt or shame connected to any of it anymore, because I was just doing the very best that I could do at the time with what I had. And what that is now is obviously completely different. What I have to offer everybody, every human now, is completely different.
No, mate, absolutely love it. Thank you for having me in
It's been a pleasure,
in the home, in the dome. And for people listening, if they don't follow you yet, or they're interested in doing work with you, or how can they connect with you?
So if you go to breathwork.com and breathwork.co.uk, you can find sessions to book on with myself, or just make contact through Instagram. And you can come here.
I can recommend the coffee.
Just reach out, really. That's all I would say. To me, or to Jacko, or the likes of us, and by changing the way that you breathe can completely change your life, you know, forever.
And if you've listened to the podcast for the first time, if you haven't subscribed, love you to subscribe. If this is some of the messaging and some of the conversation been helpful for you, it may be helpful for someone else. We'd love you to share the podcast. And if you've got any feedback on how you just some of the things that Kevin's talked about that may have, you know, been a little bit enlightening for you, or any things that come up that you'd be happy to share, we'd love to hear from you. So get in touch with Kev, either on Instagram or with myself, and we look forward to hearing any feedback.
Follow me, follow him. You lot follow me, him, my lot follow him,
and vice versa. And I've enjoyed the first podcast in person, as well as just another shining example of just everyone that I've met in this space of like breathing, and even probably wider than breathing, just like health and well-being, just trying to help people. It's always just a positive experience. It's always just support of each other, and it's just like you said, like through love. And I think that's just something that makes me want to just like keep going with what we're doing, because I think that in the next 5 years, actually this is a final question actually for you, Kev. Like I've been saying to people for a little while, particularly when I'm teaching as a master instructor, and I teach the certification with the Oxymentis. I've got a group at the moment, and I keep saying to them, like, hold on to your pants, because if you're going to get on the train, the next 5 years for breathing are going to be crazy. Like for the next 5 to 10 years maybe, or just whatever time frame you want. My final question: What do you think is the direction of breath for you, and or as a whole? Like, what do you see?
Well, I think you know where breath's going. I think you know where breath work is going. I think you know where all these different modalities and different types of breath, you know, or breathing principles is going over the next so many years. And
I feel like ice, the cold stuff is like, because cold is so much more visual and it's a little bit sexy and it can be very much, we like as individuals to show people what we're doing. It's very, whereas breathing is less sexy and it's less showable, that it's a bit of a slower burn.
Yeah, I think, you know, the cold water is a bit of a fad. It's going to back off the cold. And, you know, I don't want to, you know, sort of rock the boat for anybody there, sort of pardon the pun, but, you know, it is kind of faddy. And I know most people, when they see my Instagram, oh, Kev does the cold water, most of what I do now is breath.
Yeah.
And you can do as much cold water as you like, but if you're not breathing right when you go in it, it's kind of pointless.
Yeah. You're just going to stress the stress.
It's just stress, exactly that. So it's kind of pointless.
You're going in it because you're stressed.
Yeah, and then you're stressed when you're in it, and you come out stressed. So
you're
never in control of it. So, and you can still see people at Wim Hof events, and they're all they're still in fear, and then they're not really told how to understand that, you know, you don't get into it like that.
Yeah.
You don't get you're not making it comfortable. It's got to be comfortable. You know, when you see Wim Hof getting in at 2 degrees, he's like, "Yeah, come on in."
Yeah.
Whoa.
He's
absolutely
adapted. He's comfortable.
Oh, super comfortable. He feels it, obviously, on his body, but comfortable.
Yeah.
He ignores it enough.
Yeah.
He ignores what the mind is telling him. And I think there's big things going to happen with breath. I think for me, I'd be honest, I don't know where I'm going with it. You know, people are asking me to do corporate stuff and you know, working with kids, and I think I'd probably like to be doing a bit more work with schools.
Yeah. It's potentially easy to get, because breathing can affect everything and everyone. It can be like, you can go and do sport over here, and then someone else can come and do it. Like I find that is like, you can end up doing lots of different things. But I like personally doing lots of different things. I don't like staying in, probably because maybe I don't want to the label and identity thing being like, oh, I just do sport. Like, so I enjoy the variety. The nice thing about breathing, it can go potentially anywhere.
Sure, yeah, and you know, people kind of label me that, oh, you're the cold water guy, aren't you? And I've kind of made that rod, you know, not a rod for my own back, because I love taking people into the cold, but it's moving more and more away from the cold now, and it's becoming more and more and more about how people are breathing, because it's just connected to so much dysfunction. It affects every dysfunction in human beings. Oxygen is just critical, isn't it? You know, it's the thing that we do the most of. Yeah. So why are they paying no attention to it? But I think their ears are pricking up now, aren't they? You know, I was on to Viaduct Care in Stockport yesterday, and you know, they're using holistic treatment a lot more now, just to take some of the pressure off the NHS. You know, but there's still loads of red tape and
Well, I think that there is more of those conversations, like I've had them with doctors, with physios, you know, where people are seeing it and going like, we didn't get actually trained in this, but this is essential, and like it's going in that direction. It just takes time, but
sure.
keep doing what you're doing.
Because
and you,
mate,
you know,
absolutely.
You're playing your part, as we all are trying to do, and I think that the more one big message that I'm taking home from this is that, like, what as you're doing, being as much like, how much more of me can I be?
Sure.
You know, because inspired by you kept coming back to that during the conversation. I think it's a great one, a great invitation for everyone listening as well.
Sure.
But it's one that I'm definitely going to take myself.
Sure, yeah. Wear your heart on your sleeve and be vulnerable, be brave, and be vulnerable, because your vulnerability is you, and you can't get stronger or better without being vulnerable. It's given.
Yeah.
You know, so just be yourself.
Yeah. Thanks, Kev.
Cheers, mate.
He's been Kevin. I've been Jacko. You've been breathing. Till next time, keep it nasal.
Keep it nasal.